So looking, Rocco, first and foremost, the Horizon League, and looking at the latest odds per FanDuel, I'm going to have a write-up on this conference tournament, which gets started on Tuesday. We're recording this podcast on Monday, February 28th. Youngstown State, the favorite to win the Horizon League tournament at plus 150. Cleveland State right after that, plus 430. Northern Kentucky, plus 470, followed by Wright State at plus 650. Milwaukee, Robert Morris. Detroit, Mercy. I want to get to Detroit after you go here in a sec. But Oakland, plus 2,500. Detroit around the same price. Then Purdue, Fort Wayne, IUPUI, and Green Bay. So, Rocco, big picture here. What do you make of the Horizon League? And maybe a long shot, or do you think one of the favorites ends up taking this conference tournament?
Yeah, this is a fun one. It always is, and I think you got to start with the fact that this tournament reseeds each round, and they'll play all the way through the quarterfinals on campus. It's a huge distinction between each conference tournament, and so as we preview each, I'll try to make a comment about that. But once they get to the last four teams, we go to Indianapolis in more of a neutral setting, and that'll be interesting because some of the favored teams are from the state of Ohio, not as directly. Sorry about that. Not as directly, close to Indy as some of the others. So that'll be fascinating to see what kind of fan support they get. A lot of that can make a big difference. But Youngstown State, you have to start there. They're the elite offensive team, and they've really started to maybe pick it up a little bit better on defense. They've had a really tough defensive year most of the year. But in most of these types of deals, you got to have a good offense to carry you through each round. And I think, Youngstown's in a situation where they'll get the winner of Detroit Mercy and Purdue Fort Wayne in the quarters. And Antoine Davis, a huge story coming in, trying to continue working towards that Pistol Pete record. They'll have to keep winning for him to get there. And Detroit Mercy has that first game at home. I do think that's who Youngstown ultimately plays. And I do think, Youngstown probably a little too strong for them, but that should be a really fun quarterfinal. In this league tournament, the quarterfinals, was it 2021 here was just absolutely insane. 3 of the games went to overtime. The number 1 seed Cleveland State had to go to triple overtime before ultimately winning the whole tournament. And that quarterfinal round is wild. And I think that's coming up Thursday night. So just tune in for that. The 4 teams that I think that will get to Indy, I'm going with Youngstown State. For reasons I explained. Northern Kentucky is a team I'm going with in the next part of the bracket. I think they'll end up pretty clearly playing Oakland in that round. Well, they're already lined up with Oakland, But I give the Norse the nod there, even though it's been a series where the road team won at each team's place. So this game being at NKU, Oakland probably being confident coming in. I just think what Northern Kentucky continues to do, they had to finish 4 straight on the road to end the regular season. They get 3 of those 4 done. And pretty tough games they had to go win. And I think they're feeling really good coming into this tournament. I think it's just enough to get them over the hump. But Campy's team is always tough. And then the next team I have going to Indy's Cleveland State. Cleveland State will have to likely take on a Robert Morris team who's hot and cold. Robert Morris had an incredible week 2 weeks ago, knocking off 2 of the best teams in the league. They turn around and lose to IUPUI. And now RMU's got to beat our IUPUI here just to get to Cleveland State. But the last time the Colonials and the Vikings met up, Eli, it was a 57-55 rock fight in Cleveland. Both teams, only made 4 3-pointers in that game each. So that's a game coming up most likely on Thursday, assuming Robert Morris gets past IUPUI. That could be a real low-scoring game and a real grinder. But I like the character of this Cleveland State team. It's a team that I saw in person last year. Spider Johnson's one of my favorite players. He exudes toughness. So a slim nod to the Vikings. And then the last team in India, this is my surprise, the one you've been waiting for. I thought it was a surprise, but the way you read the odds, it sounds like this is what everybody's expecting. Is I do expect Wright State to not only have a cakewalk with Green Bay, the much weaker team between Green Bay and IUPUI in that first game, but also be able to go into Milwaukee and get the job done. And I think, it's interesting to see a 7 seed play a 2 seed, but actually the 7 seed swept them during the season. And, Wright State is actually, if you look at the data over the last 5 weeks, they're playing the best ball in the whole league. And so, some of that doesn't show up in their record, but on a possession-by-possession basis, it is showing up. And I think the coaching pedigree of Scott Nagy, you can never count him out in an event like this. And I think they're kind of due. So I think Wright State gets to Indy. Apologies to Milwaukee, but first-year coach Bart Lundy, still a successful year. Then in the championship game, I do have Youngstown taking on Wright State. I like the Youngstown NKU battle. I think it will be a battle. Penguins just a little too much offense. I think it's going to carry them through. It will behoove them to build a big lead early in that potential matchup. On the Wright State side, I think even though they got swept by Cleveland State during the year, I think that just plays into the revenge factor, and I think the Nagy factor really gives them an edge against first-year head coach for Cleveland State. So Youngstown Wright State, to me, last time they played, they went triple overtime. So that could be a wild one. It could be a wild championship game. I think the major upside from a betting standpoint is obviously Wright State, but Youngstown's the favorite. I can easily see them winning it as well, and that's how I see it playing out.
No, everything was fantastic there. Trey Calvin, one of the better mid-major scorers and prolific scorers, not only, again, in the mid-major ranks, but across college basketball. So Rocco mentioned Wright State plus 650, and if you kind of look at the way this defense is structured, and not only are they playing really good basketball of late, like Rocco mentioned, but defensively, even though they're about in the middle of the pack in terms of the conference in Horizon League play, they force opposing offenses to play in isolation, because you look at opponents' assist rate and they're allowing the lowest assist rate in conference play. So like you mentioned, from a schematic standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, with Nagy, he definitely structures his defenses really well, especially in a tournament setting and being difficult to prepare for. I don't think I'm going to have a bet in this conference tournament futures market, to be honest, but Detroit to me is worth a look just because of the way Davis can take over a game. And we saw it last year. I forget who they played, maybe in the second round. I think I bet them plus 3.5. They got blitzed in that game because Davis was getting doubled essentially on ball screens and had a horrific shooting night. But I mean, it's hot and cold with that guy. If he goes off, Detroit has a shot to go deep in the conference tournament. So it was worth a look for me, but then when you start digging, even though the number is intriguing at plus 2,400, plus 2,500, so 24, 25 to 1, I'm okay. But I do like your Wright State call. It's an interesting pick, especially with another prolific scorer like Trey Calvin. We saw him in non-conference play when Louisville was being priced into the market way too aggressively, and he had a huge game at Louisville they upset them within the first 2 or 3 games of the season. So I like it, and maybe you should place a wager when you get to one of these legal betting states on Wright State, man, or I'll let you stay away from that if you want to as well.
Yeah, it's really not my thing until we get to March Madness, then maybe a couple bucks here or there on the tourney, but I got to stay in my lane. But the thing I would say there is, all these tournaments are about matchups, and that's why I go into the nuts and bolts about how they're going to get there. And Wright State just has a really great draw. I mean, Green Bay is pretty much done. They're looking for a coach. Players they've been just getting killed. It's not even going to be a sweat for them, in my opinion. And then they're going to go to Milwaukee, which is the most, even though they're the number 2 seed, that's the best place they could have gone. So if they go up there and get that done like I expect them to, that gets them to Indy. They're rested. Now they're on a neutral court. They don't have to play at campus sites anymore. So it's a beautiful draw for Wright State, and that's half the battle in all these brackets.